listening to Raconteurs News. It's 2018. A fucking set 2018 days to 2018. Like a wanker. This is live radio, people. What the BBC tell us isn't what the government want us to believe. Then just think of that and, think about who benefits. Because at the bottom of everything is somebody benefiting from something somewhere. And there's one thing for sure. It fucking ain't me. And it ain't you. Only sucking the cat. 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 Now it was then to sign out then, isn't it? You get a dog, or a wolf, or a spider, or a snake. How can you get a snake to be the same species as a dog? It's easy. You call the species that bites you. Weird. That bites you. Yeah. Right. That bites you. Okay. Yeah, you got a choice. Yeah. Yeah, you got a choice. Yeah. Yeah, you got a choice. Yeah, you got a choice. Well, you want a punch in the face or a kick in the body? Yeah. So what did you want to talk about? Bollocks. Yes, Jason bollocks. No bills of exchange. That's not much I'm interested in fucking cricket. We're not talking about molecule of intelligence, would you see, buddy? Exactly. All the thinking is, which one of us are you going to propose to this evening? A lot of men who don't have sex. Hello, this is Heath Dweft, and I listen to Raconteurs News. Good evening. Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Raconteurs News. It is it's the 5th of February. We're into February already in 2019. Keep getting that right. And I hope you're enjoying these intros. I'm trying to do different intros. And I thought that was I thought I could see Watson in the background having a shit on the floor, but he weren't. So anyway, I hope you've had a great day, and everything's hunky dory in your little world, in your life, and everything. We're going to get stuck into some really, really interesting stuff tonight. So without further ado, I want to introduce my co-host, Paul Webster. Evening, Paul. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this. I've not spoken to Joe before, so little tidbits I've heard from it. It'll be an interesting exchange. Yeah, right. As you probably know, if you're there watching us and everything, you can see we've got two guests on this evening. We've got Annie Logical, or Anne-Marie Carey, aka Annie Logical, and we've got Joe Public as well joined us. So good evening to our guests. First, we'll go ladies first. Annie, how are you doing?
Hi, yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for having me back on your show. And hi, Joe.
Hi, Annie. It's nice to speak to you at last. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, Joe was telling us before you. I mean, you've just literally just arrived on the hangout just before, and Joe was telling me that that you and him have never met. In fact, I think he said to me that he wasn't even aware, aware of your work up until a few days ago. So we should start off and describe how you two have been thrown together.
Right. Well, I was just tagged into a post on Facebook. Now, people probably know, I've been on the show before, know what I've been doing. I've been, in the past, I've been doing a lot of research on a lot of different subjects. I used to have a YouTube video, Annie Logical. I had quite a few subscribers on that, and I used to do a lot of research about false flags and what the government involvement and all sorts of things like this. So then I called my attention to flags about 16 months ago. And then I got a website together and collected as much information as I could about it, with the idea of having a campaign start 6 months later, which happened. In the meantime, in the first instance, I came across Mark Steele, who I thought was fantastic in the beginning. I was really pleased that someone was out there fighting for us and taking on councils and all this sort of thing. So obviously, I had an interview with Richie Allen. I then got him an interview with Richie Allen after me. That was his first interview on 5G. I started the leaflet campaign. I put his political party on the leaflet, link to his political party, and I was quite happy, you know, to talk to him, emails and everything. I thought he was great. Now, as we were going along with the campaign, someone mentioned that we should really get experts involved. So I contacted the experts who've got a website, and Powerwatch UK. They're also involved with lots of different areas to do with protesting against electromagnetic radiation. So I thought it'd be a good idea to get them on board and ask them their idea what they thought about Gateshead lampposts emitting 5G. Well, to cut a long story short, it turned out that they'd spoke to Steele before I'd spoke to them, that he had called them charlatans. They'd offered to go to Gateshead, test the lamppost with the equipment that they needed to be using, which was one directional equipment rather than the multi-directional equipment that he used. They also mentioned that he used a smartphone, which would have picked up the signal. Now, he completely was disrespectful to them, and he told them to bugger off and didn't want to know anything about them. As far as he was concerned, they were charlatans. Now, when they told me this, I thought, well, that was really odd, because surely you would want experts involved. So I asked him quite politely, you know, why have you not got these people involved? And then that's when he turned on me. So after that, I thought there's something not right about this man. And I'm a researcher. That's what I do. So I went and done all my research. I did try to debate with him about a year ago, which turned into a farce. When I was trying to ask him questions about the equipment that he used and why he wouldn't let the experts go in and all this sort of stuff. It just turned into a shouting match. So that was abandoned. So then I done a lot of research after that, and I found out that he's linked to certain organizations that are pushing the 5G agenda, which he quite happily mentions on his LinkedIn profile, such as Innovate UK, Horizon 2020, and the Urban Mobility Transport Initiative, which, by the way, himself and Gateshead Council are both involved in. So I automatically thought there's something strange about that. He's supposed to be an enemy of Gateshead Council, and yet here he is. He's linked to them in this way. So then I went to do a lot more research, and then what I found out was that not only is he linked to Horizon 2020, who are they're basically the biggest group that pay for research and development for 5G, and they were on his LinkedIn profile. So then I went and found other stuff about him, like the fact that he was consulted by Gateshead Council on this smart agenda back in 2013. And he's a collaborator with the councils, all things that pointed to something rather odd going on, which I thought...
So, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't expect somebody that's in that sort of campaign to be involved in those sort of groups. We've done a couple of shows before, and we've been through a lot of that. So there's a lot of information there on the other two shows about the 5G. I wanted to specifically, you were tagged in a post, and I noticed that post, and then I noticed what was happening around it, which is why I decided to invite yourself and Joe onto the show to talk about it. So if we can just bring in Joe. Joe, what's your experience? Can you? You need to unmute your mic, because I've muted it for you while we were doing while you weren't talking, because we were getting a little bit of feedback. So what's your experiences, and how did you end up on this show?
Whoa, okay. Well, let's just say that I'm no expert in 5G. The first I heard about 5G was probably around about May last year, the beginning of May 2018. And when I was made aware of it, I posted up a couple of posts saying, "Whoa, we need to be looking at this weaponized Wi-Fi." And since that day, I had to go and count them the other day to be sure. I've posted 42 posts since May the 2nd, 2018, raising awareness to the dangers of 5G. I am 100% convinced that this is a very dangerous step into the unknown with 5G. And after watching a 9-year-old video on YouTube about millimeter wave crowd control systems, which use 90 gigahertz to agitate the water molecules in your skin and make you run away from a demonstration area. Now, as a former activist and protester, obviously those sort of things interested me. So I started looking at it, but not with a view to making sure the public remained informed about the 5G phenomena, the dangers of 5G. But my main role was to try and find a way to combat that militarized Pentagon control system, which is the 9-year-old video from YouTube has actually transpired 10 years down the line. That is now employed, that technique that you see in the video, and I will put it on my Facebook wall. That technique is now employed at the Pentagon to control crowds. Now, if you change the word crowd to public, you're on the right track. It's a public control system, and they call it the access denial system. In other words, you're denied access because your skin feels like it's burning and you have to run away. That to me is a weapon, and that works in the millimeter wave range, and that is at 90 gigahertz. Now, as we know, 5G runs from 60 gigahertz at the moment up to 300 gigahertz, but it can run further. They can expand it. If they cranked it up, they could cook us all. And I do believe it is a dangerous, untested and unregulated product that's been rolled out. I mean, some of those posts I'm talking about, I posted that the UN don't even have the technical understanding of what 5G is. So throughout the night, I'm going to throw these up on my Facebook wall. And these are all posts from over the last year, which, again, the reason I got involved is because when you pass off images that are not factually correct, you bring you raise the chances of bringing a movement into disrepute. So that was where I started to go, the same as Annie. I started to go, hang on, something's not quite right here. Although it was just a little before, because I did have some back and forth Facebook messaging with Mark when I first introduced myself to him, because I thought I had something that he might be interested in taking to his followers to protect themselves from 5G. Because not only have I looked at the weaponized 5G, where it originated in Israel, and the fact that Israel doesn't have 5G, and followed all the way through, I've actually gone a bit further and started to look at ways as to how the public can protect themselves, because that's obviously my main concern where 5G is concerned. How do you shield yourself from the Wi-Fi radiation? And I've made some fantastic inroads, and there is stuff out there that can shield you, but we can talk about that later.
It's interesting. Sorry, go on, Webber. You on? Go on.
I'm just going to say that I did see an article when they were rolling it out in Holland, and as soon as they turned the grid on, they had a mass death of birds, in the area that they rolled it out in. So there's something not right. I mean, there's people posted today of, you see this road and you can imagine it where it was like with trees, and all you've got is these tree stumps now. Jason's having it over in his area. I mean, they're wanting to stop the trees because of the aesthetic stuff going on there. They don't want to get mixed up with that. And it's like, I mean, I always get mixed up, me, Joe, when people start using truther and movement, because I'm looking for the truth. Do you know what I mean? I don't know where all this takes us, but we've got to be able to ask the questions. And when if somebody's got something to say about you, that's one thing. But come and talk about the information. Bring information to back up what you're saying. If you've not got it and you're just calling people names, that doesn't do anybody any good. But it does. It shows you, balances it up. Go on, Jason.
I was just going to say, I wanted to say, it's interesting that two separate researchers that don't even know of each other's existence prior to both came to the same conclusion about somebody that also seems to be based on facts, because we've seen the facts that Annie's brought to the table before on previous interviews. I just wanted to just bring Annie back in. If Annie, Joe is self-confessed that he doesn't know much about 5G, and he gave us a little bit of information there. Was that pretty much accurate? And what did you make of the birds situation, Annie? You're muted. She might have gone to make herself a cup of tea.
Bless her.
Go on.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Yeah.
It's all right. It's usually Jason that does it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so basically 5G is going to supposedly support at least 100 billion devices, basically using uncapped bandwidth and use, like Joe says, of this millimeter wave technology, which is it's a higher frequency that we've been used to. The 5G is it's a higher frequency, but it's much shorter wavelengths. So yeah, I mean, it's highly dangerous, and there's many studies to prove that what we're using now is already potential danger to us. I've got thousands of research articles, etc., on my website at Analogical Uncensored. If anyone wants to go and find out the studies that have already been created, there's so many of them already. So we can see that, you know, we've got this vast network of, we're going to have a vast network of these sites on towers and rooftops and small cell towers in urban areas and everything. We also know that they don't travel well through buildings, and they tend to be observed by rain and plants because that apparently interferes with the signal.
Well, it was Lockheed Martin, wasn't it, that have had input with all this stuff about rolling it out? Isn't it Lockheed Martin that's linked with this stuff, Annie? Because I thought I remember you saying that you'd linked sites of Mark Steele's, that his businesses was linked to Lockheed Martin, who are part of this 5G rollout.
Right, well, I haven't actually said anything about him being linked to Lockheed Martin because I don't actually know that. I mean, that's the first I've actually heard about it. What I do know is that this technology, DARPA hired 7 companies, apparently, to reinvent the phased array antenna. And that program was sponsored by DARPA, and that included a load of companies that included Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Rockwell Collins, Northrop Grumman, is it? Raytheon.
Yeah, so they're linked with all these weapons, especially the new patents that were all coming out, which are all linked with the 5G. But it's also, I also find it interesting that it was Lockheed Martin that got the contract for the census in 2011. Well, they were in charge of compiling all that. They ended up losing it all, right? But
well, these organisations, you'll always find it's like a revolving door. You will always find these same organisations involved in everything. And as well as that, there's another company, and it's called Pivotal Comware, and that's a startup with the backing of Bill Gates. Now, this company's just not long ago completed a field trial at 28 gigahertz. And they've called it holographic beamforming technology. So there was a demonstration was set up in Pivotal's hometown in Washington, and they managed to create a beamforming repeater, it's called, which is a bit technical for me. But anyway, pivotal system grabs the signal from outside and amplifies it through the living room or through the house or whatever. So now they've got the technology now where, you know, they can actually beam the stuff right through your house, whereas before they were saying, oh, you know, the smart cells need to be near everybody's homes. They seem to have another idea of what they're going to do to amplify this through people's homes. Now, the company isn't disclosing the identities of any of the operators that were part of the trial, but they said that it's going to be on the market this year. So we know that these companies are, as we say, we're all in together. And the other thing is that the testing of 5G has been ongoing in many applications for many years, in many areas around the UK and obviously worldwide as well. Now, Cisco is well involved in all of this stuff. Cisco's delivered a lot of the test beds and trials in the rural areas. Other areas around the UK, I've got a list of the areas on my website if anyone wants to go and find out all the different areas that are involved in the testing of 5G. Bristol.
Did you look into that, what we were talking about, Annie? The one in Holland where they said when they rolled the 5G out, there was a mass death of birds.
Yeah, I have seen the link to that, and you know, and to be honest, it doesn't surprise me at all, because you're talking about, you know, it
is vibration and frequencies we're talking about. We exist on this vibration and frequency. There's a lot of things that you can do manipulating this. People have got to realize that just because you might not believe it.
Exactly, you know, there's so much going on. Everything that's happening now is going on. As far as I'm concerned, everything that's happening now is all about bringing in this 5G and this smart city agenda, and it's rife everywhere. You know, I've been looking at this for like over a year now, and it's unbelievable. Even, I'll go into it later on, but I was going to say Bristol deserves a special mention because they've taken to bribing the public with the offer of free kitchen appliances. Yeah, so you're saying take part in this research. This is an example of their attempts to normalize and introduce this stuff. So they're offering people free fridges and free washing machines and all that if they take part in the research. This is how desperate they are to get this, you know, for people to take this on board. And don't forget, there was a lot of cases of suicides around specific areas of Bristol, and Bristol was one of the areas testing 5G. And I know there was a lot of suicides of the university students, which, you know, is quite startling, isn't it?
That went quiet then, all of a sudden, didn't it? Joe, you need to unmute your microphone, mate. I keep muting I mute your microphone. I'm going to try and do it on a different thing. See if then I'll be able to unmute it. It's just that I can't unmute it.
I get that. We've had that before where I've left microphones on and it feeds back and it causes all manner of problems. So what I've done is, as Annie mentioned, Bristol, I've now bounced a post about Bristol that I posted back in November 2018 about suicides in Bristol. So I want to reiterate, to call us 5G deniers is an absolute outrage, because in November I was posting links about suicide-related deaths in Bristol and how they are being, you know, confirmed. Everyone agrees here that, like, 5G is a dangerous weapon. Right? And the thing is, it's not cranked up yet. It's not dangerous. I'd like to just touch on what Robert was saying about birds in Holland. There was thousands of birds fell out the skies. How many of them had nosebleeds? None. They were just dead. And the thing is that 5G affects you on a vibrational level, on a frequency level. It gives you anxiety. It gives you tumours. It messes with your mental health. I'm just about to post a link to firemen out in the US from a little bit earlier in last year that have now been diagnosed with brain tumours because they were working on, or I can't remember the post, but there are firefighters in the US that were damaged by 5G radiation, 5G Wi-Fi radiation. So we're not denying that it's dangerous. We're just saying that, I'm just saying, I'm not going to speak for any at all, but I'm just saying that there's a fine line between scaremongering and posting the facts. And if you start scaremongering using, like, for instance, I mean, I wasn't even aware of this frostbite image the other day. But if you're going to post up an image of someone with frostbite and say that is due to Wi-Fi radiation, then you're doing more harm than good. And if you call yourself an expert, you should know better. Because if my friends message me when I post up something that's inaccurate, the first thing I do is check that it's inaccurate and I take it down, because I don't want to be responsible for spreading misinformation.
Yeah, I know you're obviously talking about steel. Now, I've had quite a lot of correspondence from people just lately who've seen through Steele's claims, and they've had the same treatment. Anybody who disagrees with what he says or asks for proof of what he's talking about always get told that you're a 5G denier. Okay, that's what he says. You work for the government and you're a 5G denier. And then he will block you, and then he will have his brother, who's his twin brother named Graham, who goes under the fake name of Ben Travis on Facebook, and then him and others like Lee Garrett will come after you, start calling you all sorts of names, you know, you're a paedophile, you're this, you're that, and the other. Now, like you said about the guy with the frostbite, one guy told me that he'd seen the pictures of someone with frostbite, and Steele was claiming that it was damaged from the radiation. The man told him it's frostbite, and Steele turned around and said that he had to use these pictures to shake people out of their slumber because, you know, for them to get on board. Now, that is using false information, which can be proved later on to be false information. This is not going to help the cause when people are using false information. I also found out that the picture of the child with a nosebleed that has been used by Garrett and Steele as proof of 5G and Gateshead is actually Lee Garrett's son. Now, you examine the picture, you can see a bruise on his nose and you can see scratches on his head. So clearly showing that the child has taken a tumble or something along those lines anyway. So why use these images to prove that this is 5G when they can be so easily bunked? Now, I'd also just like to touch upon this new court case that's supposedly going on, okay? There's another guy who doubted me about a year ago when I was saying that Steele was up to no good. This is before I'd done all the research. He contacted me recently and he said that he'd realised that Steele was up to no good and that he'd become annoyed because this guy had questioned him and he'd blanked him also. So as far as the court case goes, he's now asking for 5G. Now, what a piss take. He's asking for £5,000, 5G, yeah, to pay for the case. Now, he's claiming he wants to defend his corner on the 8th of February at the Crown Court in Newcastle at 10 o'clock. Now, I've already pointed out that the last Crown Court case was a complete fake because there's no mention of it in the law pages, and they have to list every single case that appears. And it was, as I've said before, held before a judge called Judge Nolan, who's a known advocacy trainer. In other words, he stands in court cases that are training fake cases. This is the same judge who declares Steele is an expert on 5G. Now, the thing is that even if people entered that courtroom and listened to that case, they're not going to know that it's an advocacy case and that it's all fake. They'll swear that it's real. But like I said, unless it's written in the law pages, then it's not real. And you can't have one rule for the rest of the justice system and a separate rule for Mark Steele. Okay, so let's just think about the first case. The first, and I've been given some information about the first magistrate's case as well. The first case lasted all of 20 minutes. And it concluded with an adjournment because the judge, or the magistrate rather, claims he knew the witness. Now, we are told that this story resulted in a double page spread in an online edition of the Chronicle newspaper. Since when has such a insignificant case as shouting at council officials been worthy of a double page spread in a newspaper that usually would warrant a small paragraph? Man insults councillors, goes to court, case is adjourned. You know, that's it. That's all that happened. But no, it's a double page spread in an online newspaper. So they then go on to use this in all sorts of mainstream media to say this is a very serious matter. The Chronicle is owned by the Trinity Mirror, who are also responsible for the Sunday People and the Sunday Mirror, who are also involved in the phone hacking scandal. So we can see that they're not trustworthy for a start. But now every single detail was written, pointing out everything, even the fact that someone's phone rang in the court just before the case was adjourned. Now, I was under the impression that the phone belonged to a member of the public who was in Steele's camp, but now I found out from a witness that it was, I'm sorry, not a witness, from someone who was in the court, that it was a witness who actually had the phone. So the high possibility that it was a council official. Now, it's common knowledge to know that phones are not allowed in courtrooms. Okay, that's why I believe it was a fake case in the magistrate's court as well. And if you look on his YouTube video in which he discusses the case, it shows a county court judgment with no date on the top of the page. He then names some councillors and states they're the only ones with any decency to get me into this court. I thought, what the hell is that supposed to mean? He also claims to have given evidence in the Crown Court that a brain cancer death was caused by 5G. Well, where is that evidence and known by any of the scientists and doctors who oppose 5G? Where's the evidence from the Public Health England or National Statistics? Why does he not show that vital piece of information when he's making a YouTube video talking about the court procedures? He's quite happy to show all his paperwork and the dangers of electromagnetic radiation, but he doesn't show this very crucial piece of evidence to show that he's got evidence of someone dying of 5G, which has caused brain cancer. Now, another fund was called for after the magistrate's court, even though the case was supposedly adjourned, and he asked for it to be heard at Crown Court, which means that there was no case answered for in the magistrate's court because it was adjourned. Yet he was asking for £1,500 on a post on Ian Crane's page, saying that he needed it to appeal the conviction that he'd got at the magistrate's court. Well, he didn't get a conviction at the magistrate's court. It was adjourned. So why is he asking for £1,500? Now, I've also been told that only 4 members of the public turned up at the magistrate's court, all from the same group, okay? There was family members and a friend, 4 of them. That was it. 4 people in the gallery. There was 8 people in the gallery altogether. 4 of them the witnesses or friends of the witness, and 4 of them were in Steele's camp. Now, I think the clues that it's not a real case is that one member was asked to leave twice and refused to go, but no action was taken. Now, if that was a real court case and the person's asked to leave the court, they're flanked by security when they're asked to leave the court. And if they don't go, they're removed. And I know that for a fact because I've been to a court case where that happened. You wouldn't have a case where the magistrate's asking someone to leave and the guy says, no, I'm not going. And that's all right. It's fine. I was also told that the prosecutor left the court on several occasions, which is unheard of. And the actual case was in whispers so that no one could actually hear what was being discussed, and that Steele had Ian Crane as his lawyer at the magistrate court. Now, I've also pointed out that the YouTube video of him being served papers by the police and a counsellor is also against normal procedures. It's a court official's job. So no case was conducted in the magistrate's court. The case in the Crown Court with no paper trail, held by an advocacy training judge named Nolan, and now he's claimed that he's going back to defend his name and needs another £5,000. So what happens when that doesn't appear in the law pages also?
It's £5,000. I mean, Ian Crane must be charging an absolute fortune to to be his lawyer. 1,500 quid, you know, for a quarter of an hour's work. Listen, I want to say hello to everyone who's in the chat room tonight. We've got a busy chat room. Steve Owen, Super Leeds, Kevin Street is in there. Hi to you, Kevin. It's Same Coffee. Lots and lots of people in the chat room. It's really vibrant. If you're listening, if you signed into YouTube, you can join in on the chat room as well. Have some fun in there. I think it's a good chat room, and it's we don't have any trouble and we don't tolerate it at all. Joe, I just want to say to you, mate, I keep having to mute your microphone. I'm just getting a little bit of feedback. So if you've got something you want to say at any point, just stick your hand up or stick it and just say if there's anything you want to add to what's being said.
Unless if you've got any headphones, Joe. Have you got any headphones that you could use? No. No worries.
All right, never mind. Right, anyway, you're listening to Raconteurs News. We've got Annie Logical, Anne-Marie Carey, and Joe Public with us as well. Here talking, we're talking 5G. We're talking a number of issues. I know we're going to talk about social media as well, because this is the reason, really, that they're both on this show and they're being thrust together as well. As I mentioned earlier on, it's quite interesting that they both. They both came to the same conclusion regarding certain people, totally independently of each other. So what happened with you, Joe? I mean, I know you put a post up with lots of different things in it, but did you? Was this something I can't remember? One of Steele's posts or something like that that you screenshotted a lot of stuff? No, you've muted your son again, mate. You've muted your son.
I'll open up my mute thing when I need to talk, and when I forget to mute myself afterwards. So you just hit it, and I'll remember to open it up whenever I start. Okay. So okay, well, yeah, the social media side definitely get onto. But before we go there, Annie was saying about people being removed from courts. Yeah, it's called contempt of court. If you muck about in a courtroom, the judge can have you taken down and sat in the cells until kingdom come if he wants to. There is no law to protect you. It's contempt of court. But we'll put that aside. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that Annie said that, or in fact, a lot of videos state that Ian R. Crane represented Mr. Steele at court. Well, in fact, the Chronicle states that a Ruth Foster was his advocate. Now, an advocate can speak for you in court. A Mackenzie friend can't, but an advocate can. And the Chronicle Live did list Ruth Foster as being the advocate speaking for Mr. Steele. Although in another Chronicle article, it said that Mr. Steele represented himself, although that was a previous article. So I'm assuming that he represented himself. Then when he went back to court, he had this Ruth Foster to advocate for him. It's a common law thing from what I can understand. Yeah, the social media side of things. I mean, I don't go looking for trouble. A few people brought me concerns about Mark Steele. And you've got to understand that back in November, I was watching Mark Steele stuff, and I made a post about Mark Steele, and I actually said I thought he was doing sterling stuff. Those were my words, and I'm just going to post that now for people that are looking on Facebook. Sterling stuff it was, I thought at the time, and I wanted to wish him a happy birthday. And we communicated on Facebook for about 6 or 7 messages. But I found, because I sent him a link to what I consider a very, very good radiation shield product that's manufactured in the US by a Department of Defense supplier that supplies the military and the police and the fire brigade with clothing and equipment that shield you from Wi-Fi radiation. Now think about that for a minute. I find this firm it's a very expensive, they're very expensive products. They do a paint, a washing compound, and a spray that you put on your windows. And it will shield you up to 1.1 terahertz, right? That blows anything Wi-Fi out of the water. So if you wanted to invest in this, and because it's so expensive, I was suggesting to people that they get into little co-ops of 4 and buy it and divide it up amongst them. Someone has it delivered, they weigh it out, and they send out the powder or the additive to their friends. And if it's used wisely and ingeniously, it will work. Now, I put that to him, but all I got back was an importance of how we should rebel, and we should be fighting this, and we should be on the streets, and we should be wearing yellow vests, which I think Mr. Steele's also involved in. It's all about confrontation rather than providing a safety net for the public. You see, I don't care about activists. I don't work for activists. I don't work with activists. I work with and for the public. I do my bit to make sure that the public, the general public at large, has as much information and the best forms of defence to whatever the problem is. And I proffer those forward once I've researched them. You know, I make no money. I'll make this quite clear now. I don't have GoFundMe pages. I don't. All I have is a couple of close friends that say, Joe, are you on your arse this month? And I'll say, yeah. And they say, oh, I'll put 20 quid in your account, mate. And that's all I've got. And my accounts actually prove what comes into my life, because I'm not on the dole. I don't have job seekers. I'm not employed. I get no counsel. I'm not sponsored or protected or owned by the government in any way. In fact, like I said, from the day that the public paid my fine and kept me out of jail, the public owns my arse. I owe them my fucking freedom. So I'm not going to do them wrong. But the social media side, when I came across the image of the Chinese, the Asian lady with a nosebleed and a guy with a mask over his face, which is on my wall at the moment, and in that screen cap thread, I had to say something, because I'd read the article 4 or 5 hours earlier, and it was clearly about air pollution. And I'm not stupid. I looked into air pollution, and India, China, Thailand, and other Asian countries have the highest levels of toxic pollution going, because you've got, I mean, you remember Bhopal, the Indian chemical plant? You know, all that stuff goes into the air. And the thing that really nailed it for me, you can't call it you can't call those nosebleeds Wi-Fi related or microwave related or millimeter related or 5G related when there's a huge smog over the country. Wi-Fi radiation doesn't produce smog, doesn't produce air pollution, doesn't produce physical particles. It's in the radio frequencies, so you don't see it. So when I see pictures that I know can be attributed to other symptoms and other causes, I know that someone's walking a fine line, because they are taking images that are not associated with the cause that they are chasing, and stretching and reaching and trying to make them fit. And an expert shouldn't need to do that. And which, another thing that annoyed me in the thread, which is on my wall, and I will share it again so people can look. If you look through the screen caps, you'll see that when I ask Mr. Steele for evidence that what he's saying is correct, he tells me it's classified. Well, he's a whistleblower. There is no such thing as classified. And one last thing I wanted to touch on before I shut up again is Annie mentioned about how these people all centre around Ian R. Crane. Well, Ian R. Crane doesn't come out of this smelling of roses either, because I've exposed him once as like the emperor who has no clothes on. And if you go back even further, he was involved in the Gulf oil spill movement, and he derailed that. He derailed the fracking movement over here by using division. He would always set up 2 camps and then tell the other camp that the other camp was full of shills and infiltrators. It's a tried and tested tactic from the establishment and the authorities. 2 years ago, when I brought to the public's attention that certain individuals in the children's sexual abuse movement were selling trinkets and rather than care about the actual people involved. The way to spot it is who sets up a GoFundMe page, and as Annie said, why? Because when Mr. Steele's GoFundMe page first went up, the story said he needed the $5,000 to pay for his legal team. Now, of course, his legal team was Ruth Foster, who is an advocate who works for common law. She's not paid. And also, when that was exposed, he changed his story. It's now for the appeal. But you don't need money to appeal. What you need is money for when you lose the appeal, because they will hit you with costs, and the council will hit him with $50,000 costs. Now, I mentioned before we came on, I was bankrupted by an energy giant for the tune of $50,000 because I became the litigant in person at West Newton protection site that was doing a fracking camp. And I became the litigant in person because I knew that every member of the local community, and they all owned their own farmhouses, they're all worth a few dollars and they'd like to keep it. They're hardworking farmers, you know. So I went forward as litigant in person because I have no money. And I knew I would lose, and I lost. In the past, Occupy London and other places, I've always seen the plaintiff waived the fee or waived the bankruptcy. I expected that when I did it, but it didn't happen. They actually bankrupted me. So I'm bankrupt because of Raffling Energy, because I stood up for people that I don't even know. But I'm happy with that because, do you know what? I've never had any money. I don't own my own house. I had nothing to lose. I was the perfect candidate to step forward. And being bankrupt hasn't harmed me because I don't have a job, you're right. But I don't sign on and claim benefits either. I don't fund me with me a GoFundMe page. What I do is if I need to go somewhere, just like you guys, if I need to go somewhere and film, I post up saying I need a megabus ticket. And you know what? One of my subscribers will send me a message saying, how much you need, Joe? And I'll say a tenner. Right, here's a tenner. And the moment I've booked that ticket, I take the post down because I don't want other people giving money for things that I've already got. That kind of honesty has worked really well backwards and forwards with the public because if I would have put up a GoFundMe page, in fact, when I first took on the persona of Joe Public and changed my name, a friend of mine who I would just call Wurzel started a GoFundMe page for me, and within half an hour it was taken down due to sponsoring terrorism. Right? That's not how they treat agents of the state. I'm not an agent of the state. I'm not controlled opposition. I'm not a police informer because they make my life a frigging misery. But how is it that Ian R. Crane was supposed to have been chased and pursued through the courts for $50,000 by the same energy giant, Rathling, and it was supposed to be they were going to bankrupt him, and then suddenly there was nothing ever heard about the pursuance of that case. I've got my bankruptcy that they print in the Morning Advertiser. They make sure that everyone knows, and it says Mr. Joe Public bankrupted like for this, that, and that by Raffling. Well, I've not seen one for Ian R. Crane. And as I say, when you start looking at all these people, they all centre around the same outlet. I said 2 years ago, and I made it a public post, that activism movements in the UK are all co-entailed from the top down. Do not give your money to them. I made that a public plea and I told the public, and it's up to them what they do with that information. Some people still donate to Crane. Some people donate to John Wedger. Some people donate to Bill Maloney. Some people donate to Mark Steele. But I can tell you now, I've spoken to a friend who's looked at Mark Steele's case, and this is what's going to happen. He's going to appeal. I assume he's been given leave to appeal because it takes 21 days. You have to apply within 21 days. Then you're given a date to appeal in 80 days. So he's been given leave to appeal. Whatever the reason, it might be that his advocate wasn't allowed to speak. He is going to lose that appeal. And he's going to get hit with substantial costs. And it is the costs that he's raising the money for. It's
right.
not.
So that's yeah. So it's the legal. So he's anticipating losing really, and saying, "Listen, I'm going to need some money." Like you said at the end, it's only going to cost him money if he loses the appeal. So, Annie, there were a lot of things in there that Joe brought up and pointed your way. So we've got about 10 minutes before we have a little break. But in that time, what is any responses to the stuff that Joe were bringing up there? You're muted apparently. Oh, it's muted. Hang on. Oh, there you go. Can you? That's it.
You hear me?
Yep, can hear you. Yep. Sorry about that. This thing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm of the mind now that everybody who is, like Joe says, these people who all seem to come from the same group of people, that their aim is to get everybody on the streets protesting. Now, this has all come to fruition at this particular time for a purpose. This is what I believe. Now, when you were talking about social media, of course, we know social media and search engines are being used to spy on people. Google's introduced algorithms intended to downgrade independent and alternative media. Sometimes when I'm doing research, I come up with, say, 60,000 links to a request, and it will reveal like 2 or 3 pages, and that's it. So they're definitely time to downgrade any independent research. Now, we know everything that we do and say is being monitored. We know the data collecting on us all. Most of us know that the CIA have been partners on social media data mining venture for a very long time, and that Google partners with the CIA for mapping technology and that sort of thing. I've got a lot of stuff on my website about all the companies that are involved in the smart city agenda 5G, which have all been paid by the CIA. All these startup companies are all paid by the CIA. Now, I believe that the Yellow Vest protests have been purposely organized by social media, right, especially Facebook, so that in the not too distant future, they will be able to ban groups or events that have got a political nature and ban anyone who speaks out on any of the subjects. So as far as I can see with Steele, yeah, he's taking on the whole thing of getting the yellow vests out there on the streets, because this is the whole plan, and it goes back to not just what's going on here. It goes to Paris. So everything, as far as I'm concerned, is being orchestrated for a reason, to bring about in the smart city agenda. It's the big brother system to control on us, spy on us, and even eliminate us if we don't toe the line. And that is the bottom line. It's a weapon system, as we've mentioned on many occasions before. Now, as far as the Paris being supposedly being a organic movement, well, the research that I've done shows that it's no such a thing. It was planned for certain dates. The secret societies always love to have certain dates where they pick, which means something, commemoration to them. We had the 17th of November, which is the birth and death of a prestigious rabbi who died 191 years ago to the very day, who was known for writing that people should wear illuminated garments to signify the Torah. Now, just think about that, illuminated garments. And there's also, on the very same day, that the 17th of November and the 24th was also 191 years to the very day when they held the 1827 general election, organised for the second restoration. So it's to do with the French Revolution. So we can see that these two dates are specific to these secret societies. And of course, the Facebook page reported to have been set up for the protest claims that there was 36,000 going and 209,000 interested. Well, you've got your 9/11 there again. You see, they like to do the little play with the numbers. Now, I've shown on many of my research articles that the infrastructure in Paris, such as the toll booths, the speed cameras, and even the bins, are being demolished, and apparently because of the protesters. Now, what I've also shown is that there's an agenda with Paris is to become a smart city, and I've got all the links to show that. And what they're going to need to do is to completely restructure the infrastructure. So the toll booths will have to go, the speed cameras will have to go to make way for the smart cars. Even the bins, I found out the other day, they're all breaking up the bins and all that. And I found a link to show, well, somebody sent me actually a link to show that they are going to need new bins, smart bins, where we're all going to have them, apparently, where our rubbish will be weighed. So you'll be paying depending on how much rubbish you put in your bin. So everything that's going on is in Paris. It's not organic. It's all been started for a reason. I've even shown that they had UN had global road safety meetings, which were established by the UN Secretary General, and they were launched in 2018, and France was the first country to contribute. And on the 1st of October in 2018, the UN Secretary General, along with the Federation of the Automobile Association in Paris, brought members up together for a high-level panel for road safety in Paris, and there was 57 leading personalities, including Total, the petrol company, which has got over 2,000 petrol stations across France. There was also the mayor of Paris was there, the World Group, the World Bank, people who are involved in the Clinton Foundation, the French Development Agency. They're basically the ones who define the French government's policies and stuff. So the whole timeline of it, you've got the UN having a safety trust meeting in April. A couple of weeks later, you've got the Woman Starts a Petition on Facebook. Then you've got the UN and the FIA, which is the Federation of Automobiles, having a Paris meeting on the 1st of October about the roads. And this is all to do with the urban mobility, like I've stated, in what Gateshead Council and Steel are both involved in. They've both got links to them. It's the urban mobility agenda. Once again the same agenda that's playing out in Paris, because they had the urban mobility agenda, having meetings, and it was to promote the advancement of urban mobility solutions within the ecosystem. So Paris was set to become a smart city, and that includes a complete upgrade of the infrastructure, and all the meetings were held. And like I say, it's all part of the same agenda. The idea is to get people on the streets. They want people in. You've got Macron, who started the PESCO, which is the foreign UN troops that he's already said that you're going to bring in. You've got May saying that she's going to bring in the military and the police if there's a no-deal Brexit. And I've also got want to talk about Brexit and the links that I've found to show how everything ties in, the same companies in the smart city agenda.
Brilliant. Well, absolutely excellent timing, because we are now at an hour just about. You're listening to Raconteurs News with Jason Holmes and Paul Webster. Our guests this evening are Logical, Annie Logical, Anne-Marie Carey, and Joe Public as well. And it's been packed this first hour with information, and both giving a different perspective. And it has really been, it's really flown by. We're going to take a record. We're going to play a record. It's only about 3.5 minutes long, and then we will be back. Give us a chance to replenish our glasses. Oh, look, I can show you. Look at that. I've drawn a knob as well, so That's just in case you're wondering what I'm doing when I'm sort of doodling. That's pretty much it. Right, we're going to play a record. We'll see you in about 3 minutes' time.
Making a goddamn nuisance of myself. Poking my nose in everybody's business. Oh God, will I ever learn? Cause it always backfires on me. I can't control myself no more. So I don't just stand and never go out. Every day is trouble. Every day is trouble for me. Is it my voice or my face or the clothes that I wear? Cause something's getting me noticed in a bad way. I must say, I ain't looking for no shit, but it finds me. Particularly when I'm out driving. Slow down, you know. It's all about me, not a racetrack. How the fuck did you pass your test? You're a pest. You got my heart beating in my chest. No wonder I'm so irate. Why don't you fucking indicate? I wish I had a shit gun thrown at your window, bitch. Making a goddamn nuisance of myself. Poking my nose in everybody's business. Oh God, will I ever learn? Cause it always backfires on me. I can't control myself no more. So I don't just stand and never go out. Every day is trouble. Every day is trouble for me. So I try to get my shit done quick. Don't want to waste too much time on the streets with the bricks. I know they're going to take my energy. Give me wrong raves, then I commit a felony. Score some weed, then I drive home readily. Hand my car keys in my car down steadily. Plays on my mind when I look them good at me. Load up on some roller J, get stone, write a melody. Start getting high, having less of the hunches. Put it on hold while I answer the munchies. Get about the gigs while I'm grinding the bunches. Really need to learn just to roll with the punches.
Algún día me perdonan, aquí te estaré esperando, porque yo era muy feliz cuando tú abrías los ojos. Andaba por la noche y andaba muy perdido, me faltaban que tus ojos me mostraran el camino, caminar, porque yo era muy feliz cuando tú abrías los ojos.
Making a goddamn nuisance of myself. Poking my nose in everybody's business. Oh God, will I ever learn? Cause it always backfires on me. I can't control myself no more. So I don't just stand and never go out. Every day is trouble. Every day is trouble for me. Every day is trouble. Every day is trouble. Making a goddamn nuisance of myself. Poking my nose in everybody's business. Oh God, will I ever learn? Cause it always backfires on me. I can't control myself no more. So I don't just stand and never go out. Every day is trouble. 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 Every day is trouble for me.
Welcome back to Raconteurs News on this Tuesday evening even. It's the 5th of February and it's only 9 days till Valentine's Day, so that everybody can feel left out just because they're single. Well, don't you worry about it. Don't bother with it. It's a load of bollocks. It's a piece of card. And just have love every day of the year instead of just fucking one stupid day where you go, oh, look at me, look how much I'm loved. I've got like 40 cards. 40 pieces of card that people have fucking given me. Well, why? Wow. Anyway, I suppose you're looking forward to that, maybe, aren't you?
No, don't do Valentine's, mate.
No, me neither, which it's caused me some problems in the past, but not anymore because I've got a proper woman that appreciates that I love her every day and not just on one day out of the year when I'm told to buy a card. Anyway, it's the second hour. We've got our guests. We've got Annie Logical and Joe Public as well. Webby, you were a bit quiet in the first half. How's about you kick second half off and we can get us going in the swing?
Well, it depends on where you want to go, because I mean you've arranged the guests on tonight, so I thought you'd be better directed it. I mean, when I've had the guests on, I've always had an intention of going. So where did you want to go? Because I know it wasn't just 5G.
No, it wasn't just 5G. It was social media and stuff like that. I think, Joe, come on, Joe, turn your mute mic off, mate. You want to, so there we go. Is he going to come off? Go, Joe. You're off again. You've muted yourself again.
Am I there? This is my first time on Google Hangout. I don't know how this shit works. There was a couple of things that Annie touched on. I mean, I think we should spend a bit of time on the whole thing that she just expanded on. Like, it's a very big network of fuckery. But I wanted to touch on this court case and keep it grounded. Yeah. Now, I spoke to a man that I consider one of my closest friends, and I call him the system, because he's been in it all his life. He knows the law inside out, upside down, and back to front. And he knows that this is a frivolous appeal, right? What that means is he's got no chance of winning. Mr. Steele has no chance of winning. Now, this ties in with what Annie was saying about the council and him being aligned in some way. I mean, I don't know anything about that. I haven't done as much research as Annie into that. But let me just tell you now what's going to happen at this appeal. Because if he appeals, or when he appeals, he's appealing on the 8th of February. If that appeal is turned down or dismissed, yeah, the council can level costs on him, and they will hit Mr. Mark Steele with 50 grand's worth of costs. At the moment, he's 2 grand short of 5 grand. What's he going to do? Ask the public for the other 45 grand to pay it? It's a frivolous appeal. Now, when I mentioned earlier that I'd been caught for broadcasting the name of a lifelong anonymous witness, I came back cap in hand to the public and said, I need some help here, otherwise I'm going to jail. Right? They paid my fine. How would it appear if I then went back and say, I'm going to appeal my conviction? Like, and you're going to pay for it? Because that's exactly what's happening here. It's not to finance his appeal, it's to finance the losses. And I've been assured that when he does lose, they won't just hit him for 5 grand, they'll hit him for 50k, the council. But if Annie's right, let's say that Annie's right and they're in cahoots somewhere along the line, who makes money? The council, 50 grand. If Mark Steele then raises 50 grand on a crowdfunder to pay the council, basically all he's doing is tapping into vulnerable people, scared people's money to pay for his frivolous appeal. But I have also been told that if his appeal fails and he gets hit with costs, and he then appeals that to go to the RCJ, the Royal Courts of Injustice, he could end up with bird. He could end up with prison time because it's a criminal case. It's not a civil case we're talking about. It's a criminal case. He could end up with bird. So I hope he does keep walking that tightrope that he is. We know now what he is doing with regards to the money.
Sorry, Joe, what's the criminal element of it?
He got done for harassment of the councillors. That's what he's appealing. He's not appealing the fact that he was gagged or anything like that. He's appealing the criminal conviction for harassing the councillors. Now, I noticed in the article that he had video footage of that incident, but he chose not to put it in to evidence. And that's because I know full well that when he's looked at it, he's looking like a raving lunatic. He's having a go. So he hasn't put that in as evidence. And the reason he hasn't put it in is because he knows it'll go against him. It doesn't matter what the councillors were doing. It's what he was doing, because he is the target of the criminal conviction. Now, when I got convicted, I took it on the chin, because I did post, albeit in a tiny comment and a video that was fast moving, a comment that I should have blurred out that had the complainant's name in it. If I'd have blurred that out, the video was stood, it would have been fine. But because I didn't, and subsequently the complainant come across it, she handed it to the City of London police, who were handling my case. And let's face it, the City of London police are a private police force working for the corporation City of London. They're not like, they are this country's own first ever private police force. They don't work for us. They work for the corporations. So because this was tagged on to the end of an Occupy incident, like the one I mentioned earlier, where I ended up in the Old Bailey, of all places, they tried to silence me. They tried to put me away with a malicious prosecution. And I was just grateful that it couldn't stand up in court, because as a former CCTV operator, I went through every bit of CCTV and I managed to prove that the complainant's case was a lie. That's why I was found not guilty. That's why I was cleared of any wrongdoing. But in the eyes of the old Bill, I was cleared because of a lack of evidence. That's how it works. So when I get arrested for putting this complainant's name up, they first of all, they don't charge me because my name's Joe Public. The last thing they want to see is Joe Public versus Regina in a criminal court case. It's going to look shit for them. So they summons me. But I did go, and I said, look, I didn't even know that it was a problem, because naturally, being acquitted, I thought that means there was no crime. So therefore, you can't fuck up the lifelong anonymity of a witness to a crime that didn't happen. That was my logic. Judge at the time, magistrate, Westminster Magistrates Court, designed to screw people like you and me. So it's a bit like Virginia, where Julian Assange has been indicted in a closed indictment. That court sits in Virginia. Nobody who has ever gone there has ever got a not guilty. And it's the same as me going to Westminster Magistrates. But I pleaded guilty. I said, yeah, all right, I did it. I didn't realise I did it. But be a bit lenient, Gov. I ain't got no money. I ain't on the dole. I ain't got a job. I've got no house. I've got nothing. And then he literally handed me almost $1,000 and said, if you don't pay this at $5 a week, and I added it up, it was like 36 weeks, it was like 3 years. If you don't pay this, 1 week you miss, you go to jail. Now, they don't do that to agents of the state. Like, so
right, listen, somebody's brought up a point in the chat room which I wanted to bring up with you, and we'll get Annie's take on what you've previously been saying in a few minutes. But somebody made the point in the chat room that if he was an agent of the state, he wouldn't be in magistrates' court. As Annie suggests, that the court case was a sham, that it was a training exercise. That sort of thing. So an agent of the state wouldn't have it. So if he is an agent of the state, it leans more towards Annie's what Annie's saying, that it was a sham court because there were no listings of it or anything like that. It was a sham court. It was a pretending, shall we call it? So all this money he's raising is just going to go straight into someone's pocket because they don't need it, because there's no court case really. They're just going to do a play. That's what somebody's put that point in the chat room.
Basically, like a council tax hearing. That's what they've held.
It sounds like that. Go on, Joe. Oh, right. Let's get Annie back in. Annie, I just wanted to.
Joe's muted.
Oh, muted himself, has he? I just wanted to get your take on what.
No, Annie's muted. Everybody's muted.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?
Hear me now. Hear me now.
Because I actually prefer listening to Annie than myself, and that is the God's honest truth. What I was trying to get at is that, yeah, you're right. If he was an agent of the state, they wouldn't be doing that to him, yeah? But considering the grinder I've been through, why is he calling me an agent of the state or a COINTEL operative or a police informer? Why is he calling me all these things when I have been through the same sort of things as him? The difference is I'm not connected to any council or corporation or anything like that. If he is, now think about this, if he is connected and this is all a facade, like Annie says, he will appeal. He will lose. They will hit him with 50, the council will hit him with 50 grand's worth of costs. He won't go bankrupt like I did. He will go to the public and say, bail me out. And on the strength of all the work that he's done, people will donate the money and make sure that he doesn't go bankrupt. Well, when I was found guilty, I came back and said, I did do it, fair dues, I can't afford this, they're going to screw me, I'm going to go to jail. And the public went, screw that, son, here's your £700, and I paid it within 48 hours. That meant I was not tied to the dole office for the next 3 years, making sure that every week I put in a £5. And for that, I went, thank you so much, public. My arse now belongs to you. And I work for them. But the point is, if they hit him with 50 grand's worth of costs, he can now come back and say, I need the public to pay this. Well, no, you don't need the bloody public to pay it, because you should have just took the fucking conviction, asked the public to pay the fine, the £500 fine, and walked away. Take it on the chin that you were out of order with your baby killer talk, which is where it really boiled down to. He lost the plot when he was dealing with these councillors. Now, when I meet people of not power, but prestige, I mind my P's and Q's. I stay calm. I don't lose my rag. It does seem, and this is what ties in with Annie, it does seem that this is all about becoming abusive towards people that are rolling out 5G. Well, why not just beat them with facts instead of coming up with fake rubbish and saying this is because of Wi-Fi, this is, when it's provably false, because what that does is it undermines the resistance. A man of Mark's stature will share something like the images that I've screen capped and put on my wall, and thousands of people will share that post. And then thousands more will look at those thousands of posts and say, oh, no, this is down to air pollution. Look, it says. I've researched.
You haven't had any abuse, have you, Jason, over any of this?
No, mate, no.
Oh, do you want me to shut up a minute?
Well, I was just thinking, we've nearly been on 20 minutes in the second hour, and we've not got Annie's perspective on it. And I know she wanted to.
I mute myself. It's cool. I'm
no problem. We'll have you back. We'll have you back in at some point. But I just wanted Annie's. I wanted Annie to address some of the things that you were saying, but also she was talking in the first hour that she wanted to get onto Brexit as well. So that's something that we can. That everybody's well, it's in the news at the moment. So Annie, are you there? Can you hear me?
She just muted herself.
There you go.
I'm not. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Yeah. Well, firstly, the way I'm seeing it is this. Okay. I don't want to go on about giving Mark Steele any more airtime, really. But all I'm going to say is that the whole. You've got to think about it like this. If he's a gatekeeper, then everything he's doing is part of an agenda, yeah? And there's a reason behind it. And the chances are that the guy's going to do a Tommy Robertson, get himself put in jail, and then he's going to have a bigger following. Okay, you've got to look at, you know, the wider picture here. This is what it's really all about. Now, you know, we can talk about Steele all night, but there's obviously other things more important, because the guy's a twat as far as I'm concerned. Excuse me language. Now, as I was saying about the Brexit results, now what people have got to realise is I've done some research, and what I found out is that there's a Canadian pension fund which has been funded by 17 million people, workers in Canada. Now, this is the company, they created a company called Civica, okay? Now, these are the same people who are pushing out the smart city rollout, okay? They've got, I'll go into that in a minute, but basically it's the same company who were tasked by the government to use the software to give us the Brexit results, okay? So we've got the Canadian Pension Fund using their company, and they're responsible for the Brexit results. You've got the same company, this Canadian Pension Fund, they've got different companies, one's called OMERS, one's called Arqiva. Now, they are responsible for rolling out the smart city agenda in the UK. I'm talking about everything from smart meters, small cell towers, they own 9/10 of the infrastructure, they're buying up all the spectrum. So these are fully, heavily invested in making sure the smart city 5G agenda, including smart meters for electricity and gas and water. These are the people who are involved. Same ones who've given us the Brexit vote. Now, the same company, the same organisation owned Brussels, and that reported attack happened. Okay, they were also involved in the Manchester Arena when that attack happened. Okay, they were also responsible for the benefits and housing finances for Grenfell Tower when that event happened. Okay, and they were also the company that was running Westminster Council along with Manchester Council and hundreds of other councils around the UK who were responsible for all the emergency services that were reported when the attack happened. So can you see where I'm going with this? The same company is involved in the Brexit, the smart agenda, and all these false flag events that have happened, yeah, and they've all been linked to the smart agenda. Okay, that's what all I've done a post, I've said before, about all the false flags and who's involved in the false flags. Now, we've also got the fact this same company has not long ago purchased, along with Blackstone, the Thomas Reuters news. So they now have got complete control of what we get told in the news. So, you know, they've got a company called Real Assets, which is also invested in shale gas. So they're into the fracking as well. Like I said, smart meters and also they own. Now, Arqiva is one of the preeminent national providers of TV and radio broadcasting. They snapped up the 28 gigahertz spectrum, which has been trialled, and they also were they held the first 5G field trials with Arqiva, and they've done some testing in 2017. So this company is so entrenched in the UK. The OMERS, which bought Civica, which is the same owned by the Canadian Pension Fund, is a digital partner of 140 local authorities, thousands of schools, universities, healthcare providers, blue light services, and they also partner 20 government departments, including the Home Office, the Foreign Office, the Commonwealth Office, and they also help the Foreign Office in response to crises. So we can see we've got the same there. Now, this Brexit vote, I believe that the Brexit vote was deliberately manufactured, and we claimed to have been it was nearly 50-50 according to the vote, okay? Nearly 50-50. So the whole reason for that was to get us into a them and us situation, a them and us scenario. So, because in the meantime, you see, when you think about it, think about what happens when we get the Yellow Vest protesters marching. Now, there's not a lot of it happening, you know. But if you get people like some Mark Steele, you know, oh look, Paul Mark Steele's gone to prison for 5G, let's all go on the street and protest about that, or whatever else. You've got people on the street who are pro-Brexit, you've got people on the street who are anti-Brexit. It's just a shitstorm waiting to happen, and they know that fully well. That's why it's all being perpetrated to happen at this time. Now, I believe that the idea is to get as much social unrest as they can. They will let them do what they've done in Paris, is to break up some of the infrastructure so that they can go, oh, look at the damage, you know, you'll have to pay for this damage, but not telling you that they already had plans anyway to change it all because of the new smart city agenda. It's all part of the massive psyop. That's why I'm saying to people, don't be going into the Yellow Vest protest. Instead, meet in communities, meet up in private and talk about what the best way forward and what you can do, you know. Going on to the street, if you look at, there's a book called The Art of War, okay? It's been thousands of years, you know, people have known about this, and military use it and all that. And if you look at that book, they say one thing you don't do is you don't run around like ants in an area, okay, and you don't face an army if you haven't got any, you know, you're talking about people on the street. You see, like Robocops these days, they'll get so many people out there, they'll start crushing heads. Exactly what's happened in Paris, all part of the sale, okay. But now I wanted to talk about the another company, which is what are they called, Cisco. Now, here's the thing, Cisco partnered with Newcastle Newcastle County Council, okay. Now, this is why it's not going to be difficult for them to create a court case using an advocacy training, okay. Now, as far as Cisco go, let me just find right, I've got something here I wanted to share. Right, Cisco, like I said, partnered with Newcastle County Council, City Council, whatever you call it. Cisco signed up with the French government in 2015 to push and test for smart city innovations. And that was just months before the Paris attacks. They signed up with Berlin just prior to the attacks in Berlin. The Brussels attack happened in March 2016, just months after the Brussels Digital Commissioner called for a meeting with the 10 largest telecommunications groups to speed up the implementation of 5G. Now, it's obvious that 5G testing has been used in all of these incidences of terror-related shit, and Cisco has been is one of the many companies deeply involved. There's a report on my website called A Report on the Streetlights, which was written by Cisco in 2012, and it starts off with a discussion about the growing population. So we know that the whole agenda, it's a depopulation agenda. It's an agenda to cause as much social unrest as they can muster. I think the idea really is they want the EU to dissolve because they've got plans already in place for the new system. They've got to do away with the old system to bring in their new globalist system. Okay, that's the whole idea. Everything that's happening now is gearing towards that. That's everything to do with the smart city and the 5G agenda. And that's why, you know, you've got people like Steele who are gathering support because this is what they want. They want people. Because what is he doing? Let's be honest, he's not doing anything. I've been running a campaign. There's over 50,000 people have had leaflets. I've got a website. I'm uploading stuff. I'm uploading information about 5G and the smart city agenda, not just in the UK, not just all the test areas, all the areas around the UK that are testing it, all the areas around the world that are testing it, which companies are involved, which government agencies, who's pulling the strings, all this sort of stuff, because that's what we all need to be doing. And people like Mark Steele with his Sun Party have got a website, and they're not talking about anywhere except for Gateshead, as if Gateshead is the only place in the world and everywhere else has to be ignored. That's a big red flag for anybody. You've got to realise that this is an agenda. This guy's probably going to go to prison. It wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't get locked up, becomes a big 5G hero, and everyone goes on the streets for Yellow Vest protests. So we've got to be careful here, folks, because we know what the agenda is. And I'm so shocked and surprised that so many people who've been talking about this agenda for so long in the past on social media, all of a sudden, they're all going, oh yeah, let's put our yellow jackets on and get out there. I can't believe it. I'm saying, you know what the agenda is. You know what they've been trying to do. You know that May has already said that she's going to bring out, you know, the military, training them with the police and all that. In the case of a no deal Brexit, the whole thing is part of the plan, and people are still going along with it. I'm just going to take a break because I need a drink now.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Annie. Joe, what's your take on what you're hearing, what you're listening? What's your take on Brexit and the yellow vest thing? I think it's pretty similar to Annie's, but go on in your own words, mate.
It is obviously, now I'm the first to say I voted leave, right? But I was only given one question: do you want in or out? Yeah, and that's where it all started. The question was loaded, but they didn't. The hierarchy enslaving us, did not expect the result they got. From the moment that result was in, the wheels started turning in the best way to make it wrong, to screw it up.
Swear, Joe, you're all right to swear. We don't go.
I'm a terrible swearer, but I am also aware that, you know, some people don't like bad language on a live stream.
We can't do anything about that, Joe, when Jason's on.
No, well, I mean, it's okay. I haven't heard any cuss words all night, so I've tried to moderate myself.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you want to hear some swear words, Joe, what's your opinion on Israel?
That for another show, because I have a problem with Zionist Israel. I love the Jewish religion, and I love people that fucking follow the faith Judea, but I have a big problem with Zionism, and Zionism infests our parliament. So let's make that another show, because if I get onto that now, you'll never shut me up. There was just, I mean, when Annie said about military intervention on the streets of Britain, I want you all to understand that I've been banging on for the last year, and my subscribers will tell you this, about the Civil Contingencies Act. It sounds very British, but it's basically military law. It is martial law. That elections are postponed, everything stops, you're not allowed to gather, and that is what they want. Annie is right. There is an agenda. And why do you think it's all hate on the internet at the moment? Everywhere you go, people are fighting. I refuse to allow the terms gammon and snowflake on my wall because it's an insult. You're just baiting. But why do you have to be rude about people? Why do you have to label people something or another simply because of their beliefs? Now, I'm not a follower of the EDL, and I absolutely abhor Tommy Robinson because he's another Zionist. And Zionism, if you look up the dictionary definition, means Israel first. And there's a video on my Facebook wall that an Israeli Mossad person actually turns around and says, there is no dual loyalty. If you are for Zionism, you are putting Israel first. Now, considering there are a ton of people on the left and a ton of people on the right in Parliament that are all Zionists, that have all been bought and paid for, puppets by Israel, they are influencing our politics. Now, last year, I launched a Parliament petition campaign saying that we should debate the fact that Israel has improper influence in our government and in our politics. And it took me half a year to get them to agree to post it. And when they did, it was shadow banned. Now, I don't know if you know, but I'm shadow banned on Twitter, shadow banned on YouTube, shadow banned on Google, shadow banned on Facebook. And my Parliament petition was shadow banned also. It was suppressed. Like, we got 13,000 people to agree. All I've done really is I put them in harm's way because now there's 13,000 people that are opposed to Zionism, that the government has now got their details. And it is a well-known, documented fact that Israel and the Zionist government of Israel is now withholding, like where the Louisiana dam burst and hurricane took place, people there had to sign a document saying they wouldn't boycott Israel in return for financial aid for this flood. But to me, that is totally against Article 20 of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which says, Section 2, no one should be compelled to belong to an organisation. Well, we're all being forced to agree with Zionism, and that's against our human rights, a Universal Declaration. I'll hand over to you guys.
It was just that you. Paul's just sent me a message on Messenger. I'm going to read it out because it just says it's a good job he's leaving Israel for another show, eh? Lol.
That's the kind of worms.
Well, we certainly do, and that's what we like to do on here on Raconteurs News. Everyone knows I'm a big Israel fan. I've been watching. Like I said, I like to watch both sides, and I've been watching some Ben Shapiro videos and he's got some
really.
Then he starts on Israel, and you think to yourself, first of all, he's got one of them silly hats on like Webby's. And then he's like, he's talking, and then he speaks so much sense until he gets onto Israel. And I suppose there's other things that he don't talk sense on, but he's.
In my opinion, he is a gatekeeper. He is one of the gatekeepers.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a gatekeeper. Definitely a gatekeeper. So, Joe, what's what we know you've done sort of. You mentioned that you were in the Occupy thing. What did you make of that? How did that? I watched a video today, which I went on Cookie's show last night because I got bored with football, and so I went on Cookie's show and
Me too.
What? Sorry.
Me too. I got bored with it as well, mate.
Yeah. I went on Cookie's show and he recommended somebody recommended an Adam Curtis video film called Hypernormalization, which was really good. Which again, there were bits in it that I completely disagreed with, but that were pretty good. And do you know what? I'd just completely forgotten where I were going with this place because I started talking about football. But yeah, so hypernormalization and that sort of it sort of skated over the influence. We're not supposed to be talking Israel, are we? Are we, Webby? I'll tell you what has happened, though. You know what has happened? Because you've not really been saying much, there's a lot of people out there listening.
I know. I've seen it.
Cards. You know what I mean?
I've seen it.
Unbelievable. That's what I was going to say, Joe. The Occupy movement was that's what made me think of it. Was the Occupy movement was put in there? Was in that film. What did you make of that? I didn't really pay much attention at the time, but what did you make of it?
Right, can you hear me? Because I'm not sure if I've muted myself or not. You can.
Yeah, clear.
The Occupy demonstration was probably one of the most mind-opening experiences I've ever been involved in. Yeah, I went there on the first day. I left about 5 days before the end. And it was, again, something that the City of London Corporation, the Metropolitan Police, and anyone else, they could not have predicted, because thousands turned up on the first day. It was a nightmare for them. And when it became established, after the canon, Giles Fraser, turned up in the morning after the demonstrators had fought off Old Bill all night, because the Old Bill were proper intimidating, brought out dogs, surrounded the place with vans. You know what it was, they intimidated away a lot of the support, but there was such a hardcore of people remaining that they managed it. And a few people popped tents, and before you knew it, there was a bit where you could get your head down for a few hours and then get up 4 hours later and do your stint on Stag. But the morning that everything changed at Occupy was the morning that Giles Fraser, the then canon of Occupy London, turned up, and the police said, "Would you like us to move all these protesters?" And he said, "No, everyone's welcome in God's church, but I'd like it if you'd remove all your riot police from my steps." And from that moment on, we were safe. And I'll tell you now, I'm a friend of Giles Fraser. I've known him for a long time. I know where he practices his preaching, or whatever you want to call it. I'm not a religious man, and he knows that. He actually set the stage for us. He made it possible for us to stay. But what people don't realise is that most of the Occupy tents were on Corporation City territory. They were on the street that went round the outside of the church. There was a handful. If you look at the pictures of Occupy London at the time, there was about 7 or 8 tents that were on church land, right? And that was the crux. They needed those tents gone for the church to sweep away, for the corporation to be able to sweep away the protest without embarrassing the church. Because let's face it, St. Paul was a tent maker. Right. And we've all said, you know, what would Jesus have done? And we know he threw the money lenders out. And because the church was backed or sponsored by about 8 corporations and Sir Ian Blair, the chief of police, they were in a very caught in a rock and a hard place area, which is why Giles Fraser had to resign eventually. But it still meant that we didn't have to leave. And one night we were in a pub just up the road called the London or something like that, and Giles Fraser walked in, and I said to him, "I'm so sorry that we've cost you your job, like with the church." And he went, "Fuck the church." And I was taken aback by that. But this is a man of principle. What it is to me, you know. But the idea of Occupy London was that the authorities didn't know how to deal with it. They tried their level best to demonise it in the press. LBC was running a daily poll as to whether Londoners think they should go, and it never fell below 93% that we should stay. The corporation didn't know what to do, and the PR was getting better and better all along. But the thing that really undermined and broke Occupy is the 5 people that created it, young kids. They launched it and everyone appeared, and what was done was a trap was set. All 5 were lured away to a protest at Finsbury Park, then arrested on trumped-up charges, and then bailed out of the City of London so they could no longer come back to Occupy. And what that did was that left a void for people like George Barder and Saskia Kent to move in with their facilitated jazz hands and their neuro-linguistic programming and Tavistock, Common Purpose. And from that point on, you saw all the vulnerable people being drawn towards that circle. And that's exactly what you're seeing now with vulnerable or scared people with the 5G thing being drawn towards Mark Steele and all he wants is people to put money into his GoFundMe page. Anyone that launches a GoFundMe page is normally on the take. Like, it's only when, I mean, even that beautiful one we saw in America where 2 people launched a GoFundMe page for the guy that gave his girlfriend the last 20 quid to get petrol to go home. And then a year later, it all turns out it was a scam between the 3 of them. And they all went to jail because they all fell out at the money. They all fell out over the money. The guy that was a homeless man went to the press and said, "They've not given me the money." And they've gone back and said, "Well, he's actually had loads of money and we never said it was all." But when they investigated, the whole 3 were working together. And it was a fake appeal. So anything now, someone said to me the other day, "Don't call it GoFundMe, call it Go Fraud Me." I'll leave that with you.
Magic. We got some. Cookie made a point in the chat room. Eric Cookie Munster has his own shows on Monday and Wednesday, I think, or sometime anyway. Just have a look at him, Eric Cookie Munster, and he says that most of the tents were empty props at the Occupy. What do you say to that? Does that sound about right to you?
Actually, no. Beauty there, because obviously being there all the time, I can now speak with authority on this. What the news rag did at the time, I can't remember what paper it was, but they sent up a helicopter with thermal imaging that wouldn't pick out people. It wasn't thermal imaged, it was like infrared or something like that. So that was actually debunked in a big way. And I was there because what I was at the time, I was part of the tranquility team. We weren't allowed to be called security because you need a badge. But at the time, I was security industry agency licensed. So I was doing security of a night time. And the tents were full, you know. And the video that was taken at the time of Occupy from the helicopter showing all these tents empty was actually quite spurious because it wasn't thermal imaging. It was infrared, and infrared doesn't technically go through tents, you know. And when the reporter came round, we opened up the tents and showed him people in there. He became quite agitated by the fact, like, you know, that there were people in there, and he straight away he started saying, "Oh, I feel intimidated by you lot now." You know, you've got to remember that it's an onslaught from the establishment. They use the mainstream media to try and overwhelm you, and as long as they can keep up the pressure and make you look like dirty, scruffy hippies. What was it, Boris Johnson? Crusty hippies, Boris Johnson called us. And he said, in God's name and mammon, go. Well, do you hear what he just said? In God's name and money, go. Yeah, it's all about money. But at the end of the day, you know, the cathedral itself tried to make out there was a fire hazard problem. And when we became aware of that and the fire brigade come down and said, we're going to do an inspection, we regimented all the tents. So there was walkways between everything, pictures of the whole thing through. You'll see how the Occupy movement adapted. And I will say this, with the 7 tents on the front of Occupy London that were on church land belonged to Anonymous UK. Yeah. And Anonymous UK was steadfast in that we're not going to obey any rules from anybody. We had the Occupy London facilitators coming up saying, oh, it's going to be a dry camp now. There'll be no drinking on it. So, well, screw you. I'm having a bottle of wine with my wife in a tent later. And if you want a problem with that, you know, you're out of luck because you're almost starting a regime within a movement for freedom. So there was a big bone of contention all the time, but we knew as long as we stayed on church land, they would have more trouble evicting us. We had it every day. We had people from these facilitators coming up, wheeling themselves up in wheelchairs saying, we've got some children coming. We're going to put some bouncy castles up. We want to put them where your tents are. Would you mind moving your tents just the other side of the bollards? Bullshit. Right? We called it every time and we knew it because we'd done our research. And the only reason we survived as well as we did on the front line of Occupy London is because we had good back office people like Anons on the keyboard warriors, if you like, doing the research. How do you think we found out that St. Paul was a tent maker? How do you think... Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, Joe, did you have anybody like... As in that movement, did you have anybody confronting you? Because I've seen, like, we had Sean Morris on, and he's been confronted by the same guy a couple of times, who's an articulate Asian guy who just keeps shouting that he's a racist. Won't engage in a conversation with him. He just walks around with a placard shouting, you're a racist, you're a Nazi. Did you experience any of this kind of gibberish?
During the Occupy period, what we experienced with regard to abuse, normally, and this is God's honest truth, normally came from the bankers and the oiks that work in the banking industry. They get pissed up on a Friday and a Saturday night, and they'd come through doing loads of money. Oh, what's his name? Loads of money, like and abusing us. And go on.
Harry Enfield, loads of money.
And they would come up running money under, and they're pissed up. And you got to remember, by now the old bill, the Met had given up, the City of London had given up. Giles Fraser's decision to let us stay destroyed the authority. It was the most spiritual, beautiful thing for a totally agnostic geezer like me to have witnessed. It was like watching God strike down the military. It was beautiful because they had to fuck off. And all that was left during the day was a handful of City of London Corporation Police. Now, they're the ones with the red and white checkers round their head. They patrol the square mile. They are a private police force. And of a night time on a Saturday, when all these banker oiks, pissed up, charlied up, coming out the clubs, would deliberately come to the Occupy camp, we would stand there and engage them, but totally sober and civil. So they would behave like complete oiks and vagabonds, and we would be the darlings of the old Bill. And the old Bill even turned around and said, we shake our heads at this. You know, we're supposed to be here. We can't demonise you. All we're seeing is the demonisation of these pillocks coming through. And it did actually work. It was the brilliance about Occupy is it was like rolling out a pontoon bridge. You had to roll it out as you were going, and you had to learn as you were going. But without the backup, the internet backup from Anonymous, Occupy London would never have survived as long as it did. And I know a lot of people slag off Anonymous for being COINTEL now, and they probably are, because at the time,
what amused me is the thought of Anonymous having tents. Now, was that a case that when you looked in them tents, there were nobody there because they were anonymous, or was it that like the faces were pixelated? You know, like you see on TV when you've got like an SAS bloke.
No, they had the masks on.
You know what was in those tents, mate? Laptops and chargers and phones. It was Anonymous is the internet. You know, Anonymous is like the cruel internet. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us. It was a massive movement and still is, but it's now been undermined. George Rumsfeld once said trying to take down Anonymous was like punching smoke, and it was right up until they arrested Sabu. Now, Sabu was a big turncoat that they got him on side, and he took down loads of people. I mean, it even extended as far as Laurie Love over in this country. They nailed him. They nailed Aaron Schwartz. All these people were down to people that the FBI had finally caught and turned. So Anonymous on the internet was the internet hate machine. But Anonymous on the ground, and they termed us ground fags, which I never really liked, but you couldn't be both. You can't be anonymous on the internet and then go and stick your head up above the parapet.
No, I was being facetious anyway. Listen, Joe.
But I mean, it's a fantastic subject, Anonymous, and especially Anonymous UK, because they were instrumental in making sure that Occupy London stayed there for the 3 months of the 5 months it was there. If we had removed our tents and they pleaded with us, there were people, that's how comes we know all the scumbags and the agents are, because they was all coming to us in 2012 saying, could you move your tents, please? We want to put some stuff here for the children. It was all bollocks. They wanted us off church land so it could be shifted quicker. And don't think we weren't taking names at the time. That's how comes we know who's COINTEL'd this whole activist movement. I know every name of every shitbag that's on an NGO subscribed payroll for Solace. And to be honest, I don't go on about it an awful lot, but if something comes to my attention, like George Barder, for instance, whose brother's part of some dodgy... Anyway, I won't get into it, but you see these movements going forward, like the Extinction Resistance. That's the latest one. All that one been blocking bridges. Well, all the top players there are on a payroll. Everyone else is a sheep and encouraged to do it. Yeah, but everyone else paying. Do you see what I'm saying?
I'll tell you what. If you're in all this for money, money doesn't exist, does it, Jason? It doesn't work like that.
No, that's
work like that.
And that's probably somebody who's been able to mark off one of the squares on their bingo card. Listen, we've got 5 minutes left, and I really want to get Annie back on, just to get Annie's last word on whatever she wants to talk about. Anything she wants to say before we have to say good evening, good night tonight. So if you're there, Annie, you need to unmute your mic, or shall I do it? I'll unmute it. I'll unmute your mic, and we'll see if you've got anything that you want to add in this last 5 minutes, Annie?
Well, basically, I think all these movements are all co-opted and funded anyway. We know George Soros funded the Occupy movement. We know that XR is another one who are basically telling people when they sign up, will you be willing to be arrested and all that. It's all part of the agenda, as far as I'm concerned. What else do I want to add? Well, basically, I just want to add that the UK isn't actually a member of the European Union. So our entry into it was a violation of the law, and therefore it's invalid, because Edward Heath didn't even have a referendum, did he? Because the opinion polls supposedly showed that people were opposed to it. So it was a common market then anyway. So, signing documents took us into EU on the basis of Parliament alone was a violation of the law. So basically the plan is for them to create a new world order federation of nations, and that's been the goal all along. United States of Europe, which was basically put on hold after World War II. And the globalists are looking for an international realignment to occur. But, they've obviously first got to demolish the old system. And then obviously individual countries are going to be susceptible to the globalists. But as far as I'm concerned, everything that's occurred, it's all part of the people don't realise that, Tavistock and the likes to do research on people's reactions, what's occurring in these movements and all that, all part of the agenda as far as I'm concerned. And I really do think that people should just take a step back now and think, obviously, everybody's got their gripe, and they should do as well, because everybody's been treated like shit for so long that everybody's fed up and sick of this. And back in the day, you could afford to, if you went to work, you could afford to look after your family, pay your bills and all that. I mean, even back in the 15th century, people were well paid, had a high standard of living.
Annie, with all your research, bills of exchange, paying bills, come on. You can't pay these bills. You're not learning.
What I'm saying to you is the whole point about it is this is why they've got people with the slavery of the money system, the monetary system, right? And what I'm saying is that before it wasn't. I think it was during William of Orange who surrendered the prerogative of issuing the money free of debt and interest. I think it was to the Bank of England. So therein lay the ability to create money out of nothing and benefit from this interest. So the banks, we have to change that, don't we? We have to change our whole bartering system, and we have to make sure. Now they've obviously got their plans what they're trying to do is trying to create a different system as far as finances go, where everybody's microchipped and all that, and we won't have money and all that. But that's part of the smart city agenda. Obviously that's part of the AI and all that sort of stuff. So that's something that we don't want to be contemplating. So as far as I'm concerned, I just think that we should be willing to talk. In communities should get together, not taken to the streets. Not leaving yourselves wide open to being attacked or being part of the agenda that they've already got written out it for us. You know, we need to take a step back and play the game and realize what we need to be doing is not what they want us to do. Yeah, as I said, it's all part of the smart agenda. It's all part of the same system. You get everybody out there, crunch a few heads, and then bring in the new system. So if anyone's got any better ideas, I absolutely think that, you know, community groups is the way forward. Discussion, what we can and we can't, what we should and shouldn't do, and basically we should be taking control of the councils, because they're the ones who are doing the bidding of those people in governments.
Well, I'm meeting with a local independent councillor tomorrow night, and he's going to get the full SP about this council. Believe me, because he's been locked out of council meetings for asking questions. So we'll see where we go with it. But you're right. I agree that it's got to be local levels now. I've been saying for a long time now that the protest thing, it's all about being legal. That protesting is acceptance. You're not happy about it, but it doesn't matter. It's coming in anyway. We've got to learn how to act differently and change it once and for all for the benefit of the people. The masters have become the slaves, and that's got to change.
Yeah, well, we are at a point now. We're at a complete crossroads now, where we're either going to go one way or the other. You know, and it's crucial now that people realise about all what's going on, including Brexit, including the Yellow Vest protests and everything that's going on. They realise this is all part of their agenda. You know, it was all in the master plan, and we have to make sure that we take that on board and we don't start fighting. I'm pro Brexit, you're anti-Brexit. You know, it's a joke. It's ridiculous. In the meantime, they've got the gatekeepers in place, the likes of Steele, who are not just in it for the GoFundMe. Let me assure you of that. That guy is not in it. He's getting well paid. Right? He's not just in it for the GoFundMe. He's in there because he's going to be a gatekeeper, and he's going to try and lead a movement, same as all the other people who could put themselves in these positions, yeah, to lead the movement so they can make sure that absolutely nothing gets done, nothing changes, and all everybody does is just worship this false 5G guru or whatever other issue people take on board and pretend to be wanting to change it when they're not. And we've seen it time and time again. What does it say? Well, the height of stupidity is to keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Well, that's what we seem to be doing. So I think we need to, start acting like adults.
I absolutely agree with you completely, 100%. And it's been fascinating. It's been a fascinating 2 hours with the pair of you. I really, really appreciate you agreeing to come on the show, yourself and Joe Public as well. We're going to have to end at that point. I've got loads of things here that I look at all this stuff that I wanted to say, mention at the end of the show, but we just really ain't got time. So I will just mention.
There's no cock and balls on that page then.
Oh no, my cock and balls are somewhere else.
Oh right.
There you go. There's my balls.
Yeah, where's Watson's balls?
I still want to know why you were drawing that. What drew your attention to drawing a load of balls? Like when we were talking, was it something like, well, that's a load of
Listen, Joe, listen, you do not want to get into the head of a lad from Sheffield, mate. Jesus, no, not this time.
It's like anybody else where, the doodling and what have you, and, you might even draw a house or a penis, and it's always cottages, and the penises are always circumcised, and that's perhaps a pointer as well as to where that comes from. Listen, everybody, thank you very much for joining us in the chat room. I'll just everyone committed escape, Eric Cookie, go and see his show, do his show, watch his show, go and have a look back at his back catalogue as well. I was on there last night. And a really, really interesting discussion, a really different format to what we do here as well. Krishna was mentioned as well, so I'm going to plug his show, or his or her show. I don't know who Krishna is, but I'm going to plug the show because Cookie, he said it was okay. And Steve Turgoose as well. He's got a show on a Saturday night, so check that out as well. Listen, thank you very much for joining us. I'll be back tomorrow night. There'll be an hour at least, definitely an hour. This guy's a bit flaky that I'm trying to get on. I don't know whether he thinks that me inviting him on the show was a Mandela effect or something like that. But well, you know, tomorrow we've got a dead man on the show. He's going to be coming. He's going to tell us why we're all dead. And since 2012, and we're still working.
I'm interested.
I'm interested as well. So that's going to be tomorrow night. It's Raconteurs Extra. Thank you very much to our guests tonight, Annie Logical, and Marie Carey, and also Joe Public as well. It's been absolutely superb. I think this has probably been one of the fastest 2 hours. Is that an oxymoron? One of the fastest 2 hours? It's one of the fastest shows that's gone on for quite a while. So we'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow night. Webby will see you next week. We'll be back Monday and Tuesday, definitely, and we'll see you very soon. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up on YouTube as well, because it all helps and it makes us feel nice about ourselves. Cheers, everybody. We love you. Bye.